All right, so we were talking about the market equilibrium price yesterday and gave you the graph for that. Let's give you some terminology as we finish up chapter 3. These chapters are not very long, as we've said before, but one of the terms that economists and business individuals will use is surplus. That means you have an excess amount of goods. It means that they produced more than what they were expecting that they were going to sell. So, for example, maybe a t-shirt company creates 10,000 t-shirts and they only sold 5,000. They have a surplus of 5,000 t-shirts. Well, in most cases, they try to get rid of those as best they can. How do they do that? Why do they misestimate? Well, they could misestimate because maybe the style goes, they think the style is going to be in for a long time and it just doesn't. People's tastes and preferences obviously change, but surplus just means an excess amount of goods. Now, in most cases, for the consumers, a surplus can be a good thing because it means that we might get something at a cheaper price. So, how do they eliminate surplus in the business world? How do you get rid of it? Well, one of the ways is you advertise the product. Maybe people forgot that the product was actually out there. Let me give you an example. Think about like iPhones. You have like an iPhone 7 or something like that. They have an excess or a surplus of iPhone 7s. So how do they get rid of it? Well, they advertise, hey, if you purchase a new plan, you can get an iPhone 7 for $100 or whatever. And all of a sudden, people are like, oh man, I guess I maybe could use an upgrade for an iPhone, maybe an iPhone 6. And they advertise it. Or maybe you didn't know that there was a hoodie on sale that you really, really liked, and now it's still out there. You didn't realize it, you forgot about it. They advertise it well to try to get people to go back to the businesses and actually purchase it. So they advertise it better. They make it more specific towards that advertising. Another way, you can just simply decrease the supply. You stop producing what you're producing. Now, the problem is in most cases with this analogy would be the fact that supply has already been created. The product's already out there. But all you would simply do is stop the current product from continuing to be increased, from continuing to be created, which would increase the amount of supply that is out there. Again, the more stuff that's out there, so it's kind of like the law of supply and demand if we talked about before, the more stuff is out there, the less people want it. And so you want your supply to be kind of like on a lower end in some cases because it actually drives the value of the product up. Sometimes you can actually have the government buy surplus. The government has done this. You think about this, in right now the government's buying like these face masks and these shields and personal protective equipment that they're using for like the doctors and nurses. The government does buy surplus. The government has bought surplus of farming, produce over the years, specifically in the 1800s. And sometimes you can just have the government go ahead and buy surplus, and that makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to get rid of your supply. Now, obviously, you would have to have a product that the government would want. If you're talking like expo markers, maybe the government doesn't need those, so they might not buy the surplus. So it has to be something that would appeal to them. But probably the most simple way and the fastest way for you to eliminate surplus is you just simply lower the price. And we, as consumers, benefit from this. Think about this. When you guys go up to Birch Run, why do people go to Birch Run or Great Lakes Crossing? Well, because they're technically outlets. And what that means is these are all a surplus of goods. This is why you can get a $150 pair of Nike shoes for $75. You can get a hoodie that you wanted for $60 and you can get it for $20. Jeans that you wanted for $40 and you get them for $20. Because it's a surplus. They have an excess amount of goods. You go to the North Face, you go to Under Armour. You go shop at these places and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I can't believe how cheap these prices are. Well, it's because they have an excess amount of goods. They have a surplus, and all they're going to do is lower the price, and that will make people sell it. Now, one of the things you guys have to keep in mind is, think about this. When you buy a $150 pair of shoes from Nike, brand spanking new, and then maybe 6 months later you go to the Nike outlet and you see those exact same shoes for $75. You might be like, dang, I could have saved $75. Correct. But also think of it like this. Nike made a ton of money off of you at the $150 price, and they're still making a decent amount of money off of you at the $75 price. They're not going to lose money. Businesses don't like to do that. So that's one of the right ways that you can get rid of surplus. Next, shortage. This is not having enough of the product. Now, in some cases, this could be a good thing for a business because it means people are clamoring and wanting your product, wanting your the stuff that you are producing. And there are certain ways to stop shortages. Now, again, if you're thinking ahead, probably the most simple way is just to raise the price. If all of a sudden, people are trying to sell Xboxes, and I have no idea how much an Xbox is, mainly because I don't live in my mom's basement. I don't pick my nose, and I'm not a mouth breather. So I don't really know how much an Xbox costs, but let's just say an Xbox costs $350. And all of a sudden, they are running short on Xboxes. They might raise the price to $400, and that might deter some people from buying the actual Xbox, and that would kind of get you to be able to get your supply up there. And so you can simply raise the price. Think about this, like those N95 masks that everyone's talking about. These places, some places are what they do is they call them price gouging, meaning they raise the price on these people so that people will maybe perhaps stop buying it. But they also make a ton of money if that's the case. But you can raise the price, and sometimes when you raise the price, that discourages certain people from buying certain things. You can also just simply create more of the product. You can up your production from your factory or whatever it is to create more and more of the product to try to keep up with the shortage as much as you possibly can. Another thing that you can do is you can actually discourage people from buying the product. You might be like, what? Why would you ever do that? Well, the reason you might discourage people from buying the product is because you need to get caught up on production. An example of this, I'm not sure how great of an example this might be for you guys, but because you guys don't really necessarily deal with this, but sometimes when everyone is using electricity, maybe everybody is in the summertime just blaring their AC and their air conditioning and running all of their power, and all of a sudden people are like, man, we're power grids are not going to be able to stand up to it. So Consumers Power would contact their customers and say, hey, could you use less power? Could you not run your power as much? Sometimes people do that with water in the summertime because people are watering their lawns. Hey, we're getting low on water. Can you please not do that? Some people, they've done this in the wintertime with people and running their heat because it gets so cold. Hey, Consumers contacts people, can you please not run your heat as high as you normally run it? And that's how you would discourage people from buying the product. You might be able to discourage people from buying the product by promoting one of your other products that is similar in order to get people to want to buy that product as well. Another term that you're going to deal with is a term called a price floor. Pretty simple here. This is setting the price where it cannot go lower than a certain amount. Now, price floors are usually set by the government. And what they do is they say, hey, we're going to set this at a certain level and it cannot go below this. This is done for guns. This is done for ammo sometimes. This is also done, probably the most common thing that you guys maybe have seen as far as advertising is alcohol. There's a certain price that they cannot sell alcohol below. Once in a while, you'll drive by some of those party stores. There's one at the corner of Saginaw and Hill. Dort Highway and Hill. And it usually has a sign out there that says lowest liquor prices allowed in the state. That's because the state tells you cannot sell it for a certain amount. It cannot go lower than that amount. Now, some of that is because it goes to taxes for the government, but also it can be to discourage people from buying a certain product. And then you also have what we call a price ceiling. This is obviously the opposite of this, and this is setting the price where it cannot go higher than a certain amount. This is how this works. With electrical companies such as like Consumers Power, the government will literally tell them you cannot charge more than this amount per day for a person running their electricity. Like, here's the set standard. You can't fluctuate that. Sometimes they do this. They used to do this with railroads. When airlines first started off, they kind of did this with airlines, and then they eventually said, hey, if people want to pay this, let them pay it. But a price ceiling is setting the price where it cannot go higher than a certain amount. So now all of a sudden you can't say, okay, for Xbox, you cannot sell an Xbox for more than $300. So what do? They charge $299.99. And then a price floor would be the opposite. Hey, you cannot sell a Xbox below $100. So what do? They set it right at that price. So those are some terminologies that we would deal with in dealing with economics. This concludes chapters 1 through 3. And what we're going to do is I'm going to be sending you guys a Google Forms quiz on or test on Monday, maybe even a quiz on Monday and a test on Tuesday. You will be able to use your notes for this. And it'll be kind of an interesting way to do this. It's going to be some short answer type stuff and you guys explaining things. And hopefully it makes sense. So you'll be dealing with that on Monday. You won't have any other work over the weekend. Hope you guys have a great Easter weekend. And if you have any questions, as always, please contact me.